And I then
Yeah.
said, how is the cow that's having 80% of their life taken away, how is
Yeah.
that allowing the animal to flourish? So what was your answer to that?
Because I distinguish between maximizing lifespan and flourishing
How
appropriate to
does
a
the
creature's
cow
kind. So,
flourish
it's
if
like
80%
flourishing
of
isn't
their
just
life
like
taken
merely
away?
living as long as possible. Even humans can flourish despite living like shorter lives if they live excellently according to their nature. So, like applied to animals, we'd say an animal flourishes by living according to its nature. You know, grazing, socializing.
Natures.
When it acts, a thing is natural or its nature is when it acts in accordance with its built-in capacities and ends.
Explain to me how a cow living on a man-made farm, being, fed crops that are man-made grown crops with pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, where they're being milked by human beings, where they're given, these supplements in their diet, whether it's B12 or all the other nutrients. Please explain to me how this is acting in accordance to the animal's nature.
Yeah, I would say that like most modern like industrial farms often don't fully respect a cow's nature because a cow's nature includes things like
Amazing.
roaming, you know,
Most
social
modern
behavior,
farms
maternal
do not
bonding.
respect the animal's nature. So you agree that in most cases, how pretty much everyone on this live, I would say 99%, are acquiring their meat, whether it's from
Yeah.
factory farms or just standard farms. You disagree with what they're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. The argument
Amazing.
P1, P2 conclusion literally even gets, if you go all the way back to the first two premises, it makes this clear.
Okay, so the specific place that you get your cows from, what are these cows eating?
Well, I know the farmers, I know the farm. I couldn't tell you exactly what they eat, but I do know that they're looked well after from my knowledge. Again, I can't guarantee that. I'm going to be honest.
I really
Um,
appreciate the honesty there, and I think that shows that you're actually here for a genuine conversation. So here's the problem then, right? You can admit and acknowledge that in most cases, I'd even say more than 99%, whether it's a farm that's using AI or in this context where you believe they're treated well, you know that they're
mhm.
fed crops that are, grown using different chemicals, man-made chemicals like pesticides, insecticides, herbicides. You know that they're going to be milked either using human-made machinery, which contradicts the definition of natural, or they're going to be given some kind of antibiotics, which is a vast majority of antibiotics are given to animals. So all of these terms that I just used both contradict the definition of the word natural, nature, and go against what the animal would naturally do in its nature, in nature as well. So even off the farm that you're getting your cows from,
Mhm.
technically, doesn't this contradict what you said, where the animal should have the ability to flourish, and flourishing would be by living in accordance to its nature? How is a
Yeah.
cow going through all the things that I just described, which isn't in accordance with its nature? How does this not contradict your own means of obtaining the cow meat?
Well, because my position, my argument's based on what we ought to. I'm not saying like I have applied this position
Oh,
like as
amazing.
it relates to the
We
pragmatics.
are
Like I haven't
ought.
applied this perfectly.
I really appreciate the honesty. So you're agreeing that you shouldn't be paying for the cows in the means that you are currently obtaining it from. You agree with that?
In an ideal world, yeah.
In an ideal world. Okay, so so are you saying that for you to not cause harm to the being, that it should be an ideal world circumstance for you to apply this moral framework?
I just think there are many pragmatic concerns in the culture we currently live in that would make
Can
things
you give me an
difficult.
example of one?
Yeah, like so, like let's say like where I live, let's say like in order to get the meat, I would have to travel like 2 hours or something or 3 hours to get the meat, but that would be like impractical because I couldn't like work a job properly, I couldn't look after my family, things like that. And
When
I
you
think
say
that would
travel two
outweigh.
to 3 hours to get the meat, what are you referring to here? What kind of meat are you talking about?
Let's just say there's like a specific farm out there that's a few hours away that meets all of the criteria I laid out that would make eating the meat permissible.
Before we get onto that, because that sounds really interesting, I'd love to get into that. So, just to clarify, based off the debate we've had so far, you agree that you are ought to not currently pay for what you're paying for, right?
Correct, yeah.
Amazing. So we pretty much agree. That's the position that I'm staying as well, which is the moment we don't have to unnecessarily pay for harm or violence or cruelty to animals, and we have the choice not to, then we shouldn't do that. And you've pretty much, after talking from this perspective, you also agree with my position. You're saying that we ought not to do it, even via the means where they're not using AI, even via the means where they are allowing these cows to live on a farm where they're
Oh no,
able
when
to
they
graze
when
and do all of these things.
when they do those things, when they do meet those criteria, I do think it would be okay to do it. It's if it's in those cases you gave me with the bad farms, then I don't think we ought to do it.
Yeah, but even in
But
the
the difference
context
between
where
me and
you're
you
currently
is,
doing it, you agree that you ought not to do it, right? Even in the
as it
context
relates
where,
to my specific scenario, but I'm saying, like, in my argument that I
yeah,
presented, you would reject and say that even if it met all of the criterion I listed, you would still say it's wrong to eat the animals.
yeah, of
That's where we
course,
disagree,
yeah,
because
of
I would say
course.
it would be permissible if the argument is true, if those
Okay.
criteria are met.
Okay. So just to clarify, again, like realistically in the current world that we live in, where would you acquire a cow that fit under all of your relevant threshold and categorizations that would make it morally permissible? Because even in the context which you have defined to be a scenario where you ought not to pay for that, that would already be a vast minority, right? Minority of farms are not using AI because AI, artificial insemination, is used in a vast majority of cases, definitely over 50%, which would class under the majority categorization. So even now, the way that you acquire your meat is already in a fractional minority with regards to the means of how these animals are treated, how they're processed, killed, etc. And if you already agree that even the minority is something that you ought not to pay for, can you realistically explain how you would actually go about acquiring something that you do think is morally permissible? Like, give me a
Yeah,
scenario of
hunting.
how of what the context or the scenario would be where you would obtain this cow. Go ahead.
Sure. So let's say like you go out and you could like go out to hunt an animal and you kill the animal and then consume it. I think that would be acting in accordance to the reason, serves a proper human good. I think that you allow the animal to flourish. I think it's in accordance with the nature. I think it meets all of the criteria on there laid out. That would just be an example.
Interesting. And would you just hunt the cow, or would you have any prerequisites prior to killing the cow? Like, is there anything that would make you reconsider killing it? For example, if it was a baby, would that make you reconsider killing it?
If there's like an adult cow nearby, but if not, then no.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So you would be okay hunting a baby cow?
Yeah, because it has nothing to do with how long it's been alive. It's not what I mean when I say flourishing. I've already
Okay, so
explained
so
this.
how okay, so how has a baby cow been allowed to flourish in their life by living? You said to by living in accordance with its nature, right?
Yeah, because serving a proper human good would
By
be in
living,
accordance with its
yeah,
nature.
by living in accordance to its nature. But what is in accordance to nature mean in applicable in an application to the context where you're killing a baby calf? How is that in accordance to its nature?
When we're talking, sorry, what? Sorry, and specifically when we're talking about in accordance to nature, when it comes to like killing like a baby cow,
Hunting a
um,
baby cow, exactly as you described. Yeah.
yeah, in the hunting scenario I gave you, okay, cool. Um, yeah, I would just say that like I think it would only be in accordance with like the calf's nature, if the act like the hunting fits like within a reasonable human use of animals while still respecting the kind of creature the calf is. Wait, is it calf or calf? It's calf, right?
Calf. You said
So
baby. Yeah.
I wouldn't mean like the calf naturally wants to die. Obviously, the calf wants to live, but instead, I mean something like um, humans are like naturally omnivorous and agricultural. Humans may use animals for legitimate goods, and animals are part of that kind of ordered hierarchy of living things. Therefore, the humane killing of food can be morally permissible.
Okay, cool. I'm happy to assess the humane aspect as well because I'm happy to go over how it's not humane because humane means
But,
compassion. If you have the choice between killing an animal or not killing an animal, the compassionate choice would obviously be to not unnecessarily kill the animal as
but that we
opposed to.
disagree.
Okay, yeah,
We
but
disagree on what humane
let's
means.
let me write that
But
down so
I
we can
just
come
want to
back to that
clarify.
after.
I do think like if it's a baby cow, I would agree that this would frustrate some of its natural ends, right? Like I'm not denying it wouldn't like frustrate some of them. I just still don't think it would be the kind of thing that would make the action like morally impermissible.
Okay, so you do think it's morally permissible then, right?
Yeah, but I want to clarify it would still frustrate some natural ends. I'm okay with saying that.
Okay, cool. So out of curiosity, we allow the baby cow to live in accordance to its nature, which you don't apply a time threshold to. So again, so what about the cow being in nature allows it to live in accordance with its nature? You said you wouldn't define that to just be the cow being in nature.
And just to clarify, I'm gonna have to hop off in
Nature.
like a few minutes because I'm really tired. But
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's fine. So we'll just come back to the conversation then. So hypothetically then, so what is it about the baby calf being killed that allows it to live in accordance to its nature?
yeah, because it's allowed to express its natural capacities and behaviors rather than being treated like a I don't know, like a malfunctioning machine.
Express, what did you say? Sorry?
Its natural capacities.
express its natural capacities to do.
Its nature is built for.
Its nature is built for. Okay, so give me an example of a few of those things again.
Walk around, graze.
Walk
Um,
around and graze. Okay, so
yeah.
hypothetically, then, if I went into a forest area and let's say I saw a cow that had literally just taken its first step,
Yeah.
which now falls under your categorization of living in accordance to its nature, expressing its natural capacities, being allowed to walk and graze because it's now taken its first step and it's grazed, it's now morally permissible for me to kill that cow, right?
If a cow just took its first step, you said?
Yeah, because it fits your
Yeah.
definition of.
Well, I would say that like potentially, if there were like a proportionate reason, and the killing was like humane, and I get why you might find that uncomfortable. But my reasoning would just be something like, well, the calf is still an animal; it's not a rational person, and humans may permissibly use animals for food, and I don't think moral permissibility requires the animal to reach old age. But I would say if you're killing for like sadistic pleasure or wasting life thoughtlessly, without any thought, or like preventing all expression of the calf's nature. I think that could be morally problematic. So maybe I would say there could be something morally problematic about that specific case.
Amazing. So then we agree that just because the animals had the ability to express its natural
I
capacities,
wouldn't say it has in that situation, though. That's the thing. I don't think it really has had the
no, no.
ability
So
to
I'm saying,
express. So
yes, I'm
maybe it would
saying,
be morally problematic.
but I'm saying in the context where even an animal has had the ability to express natural capacities, do the kinds of thing that its nature is built for, walk around and graze, you don't think it's acceptable. So this would mean that these
Oh
aren't
no,
your only.
no, I
Sorry, go
do
ahead.
think it's acceptable in that case. I was saying it was. It would. I said it would probably be morally problematic in the case where it's taken one step.
Okay, so then you would then add a further threshold onto the walking to be defined by set amount of steps. So what would class as
No,
enough
no, no, no,
steps
no.
to be morally permissible then?
No, it wouldn't be based on the amount of steps. It's just that if it's only taken one step, I very much doubt it's been able to meet any of the other forms of expressing its nature.
Okay, so let's say that one step allowed it to move down and graze, which would obviously just be tending to the grass, taking a chew. So it's taken its first step, it's gone down, and it's taken a piece of grass out. This now is the hypothetical that directly matches your criteria here to make it morally permissible because it's walked, it's grazed, and it's doing what it's built, what's its nature is built for. So is it now morally permissible to kill this cow because it meets your threshold requirements of what's morally permissible?
Yeah, so you're basically saying if it took like one step and it just grazed like one piece of grass, you're
Yeah,
asking me would it be okay to kill it? And this
morally
seems to be
morally
getting into
acceptable.
like you're trying to figure out if there's like a threshold of the
Yeah,
amount of
exactly.
flourishing.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say there's like like a precise threshold. Like if 3 years of flourishing, it's okay to kill. 2 years of flourishing, not okay to kill. Um, I would say that flourishing is morally relevant because expressing natural capacities matters.
I agree.
So it seems strange if like one step, one graze, one day of life suddenly satisfies the requirement. I agree with you, but I think we'd avoid a strict threshold and just argue that like the animal should not be treated. So like, how do I word this? I'm not saying like there's a point where, like the calf earned enough like flourishing points, right? Something like that.
Okay,
Um,
so I'm trying to figure out exactly what is that point which you would dictate it's now morally permissible. So if you're
I don't think
saying
there is a
that.
strict point. I want to avoid that strict point. I don't think that
Okay,
would
but if
exist
we
on
if we
my
had to
view.
delve into your psychology where you thought it was a point where it is now morally permissible, I'm simply trying to dictate now. If we're saying that this isn't the criteria anymore because it hasn't taken enough space or grazed enough, then there would obviously be a level where you do think that it has taken enough steps and grazed enough. So this would now be dependent on what you deem to be, appropriate with regards to the amount of steps. So could you give me a number? How many
But
steps
no,
would the
no,
cow
no,
have to take or graze? How many
no,
grass
because
blades does it have to graze to then be morally permissible to kill the calf?
well, I just told you it's not strict. It's not like you can't quantify a reasonability threshold. I think reasonability thresholds are inherently vague. If I said to you, let's say there's, I don't know, what percentage of a risk does somebody have to pose to your life to justify, killing them and claiming self-defense? If I said, 90%, you'd probably say it's okay. But if I said 1%, you wouldn't. And then if I, demanded you to give me a strict threshold, I don't think you could. So the same
I
thing would
could.
just apply here.
I would say more of a threat than not a threat. I would say anything above 50%. would be morally acceptable in my eyes, because I deem them to be more of a threat than not a threat, and I would think it would then be morally permissible based on the fact that
Really?
yes, if I believe that somebody
Wow.
poses a threat to my life more than they don't pose a threat to my life, I would absolutely deem it morally acceptable for me to defend myself if this
I
person
think that's
poses a
pretty
threat to me.
I think that's pretty absurd. So, like, if there was like a 49% chance that somebody killed me, you don't think it would be morally
Okay,
justified
so
for me to kill them?
let's talk about this hypothetical we're posing here. So has somebody broken into my house? Like, what's the exact scenario that you're querying me on here?
Well, we
Uh,
just have to stipulate that the the quantity or the percentage, right? Because you want to get to a strict threshold for my view. Because I
yeah,
think
you said that it would be
realistic thresholds
difficult
are
for me.
vague.
I don't think
I
it would be difficult. Suppose the hypothetical, and I'll give you an honest answer. Go ahead.
Okay. So I don't think like positions need like strict reasonability thresholds. I think they're vague. But like if you want to say there is, if this is what you want to demand, I think this would be problematic for you as well.
Okay.
Because let's say that there was a case if if you're saying it's 50%, so if it's
Above, I
51%,
said above
it's
50, yeah.
yeah, so 51%, it's morally okay to kill somebody and claim self-defense. 50%, it's not okay, it's not self-defense. That's your view, right?
Yeah, because 50% would indicate that I'm both sure and unsure that they pose a threat, which means I'm actually unsure. But the moment I see let's say, for example, I see them take out a knife, this is obviously going to drastically increase it from 50% to maybe 60 or 70%, right? Because the fact that they've taken out a weapon that has the ability to cause my life actual harm, this will obviously significantly raise it, right? And vice versa. The moment I go from 50 to 51, this means that I have a logical reason to believe that they actually do pose a threat to my life. And I'm not going to take a risk with my life because I have a lot of reasons to live. So,
So
absolutely, I would
what kind of
absolutely defend myself in that scenario. Yeah.
so what kind of example, and when I talk about like the 50, 51%, by the way, I'm not talking about your interpretation of what it would be. I'm talking about what it would be, right? Like not like what we think it would be, not what you perceive it to be in the case, just what it actually would be. So if
Yeah.
it actually was the case that somebody posed a 50% risk to my life, like we could verify that, and
Mhm.
we like went back in time, would it be morally wrong for me to kill them because they don't meet the threshold? You can do a risk analysis,
Okay, I
and that can
understand
be
what
a
you're saying.
wrong
So
risk
you're saying
analysis.
if we could factually prove that the person in front of you holds a exact 50% risk to your life, my answer is yes. I don't think it's morally acceptable to kill them because
But
I
if it
don't
was
think 50.
51%, it would be?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Because
That's
that has now crossed.
ridiculous.
How is it ridiculous that I have now ascertained that this person actually is more likely to be a risk to my life than not a risk to my life, and therefore I think it's now morally justifiable to defend my life by removing them as a threat? How is that ridiculous? Please explain that to me.
Because sure, because I don't think they have to be more of a risk to your life than 50%. They just have to be a significant risk to your life. And significance isn't just based on 51%. Like, I think that's a really weird
Yeah,
way
that's your
to
view.
classify.
You're allowed to think that it has to be significant. According to my view, if somebody holds more of a threat to me than not a threat, I would deem this to be an appropriate scenario to be able to exercise self-defense and defend myself. Yeah, that's
Well,
my view. And I'll be honest, I think a lot of people would probably agree with that percentage. I think if
I don't think they would.
okay,
Shall we
so
ask the comments?
yeah, I'd like to hear. So, guys, can you put in the chat what? Out of 100%, meaning somebody definitely poses a threat to your life. 0% meaning they definitely don't pose a threat to your life. If somebody broke into your house, guys, what percentage would be required for you to defend yourself and unalive the person? For you
The
to
host
deem
think
them as a threat or not a threat?
the
What
the host thinks
percentage?
it's more than 50%, which I think is insane. I think it could be lower
We
than
got
that,
a
and it would still be
20% here.
reasonable.
Mayan said 100%. We've got a 55-ish. We've got another 50%. We've got a 20%. We got a 25%. So yeah, most people are actually voting lower than what I said, like significantly low. We got a 35, we got a 30, 50, 48, 60. So yeah, I would say majority are currently voting in favor of below 50%. And and
Yeah.
and let's be honest, bro, right? If in this hypothetical where somebody's broken into your house, in most cases they obviously do mean some kind of harm to you. Why would somebody logically break into a house? Because the moment they go to the 50% threshold, this is obviously a scenario where after the 50% you no longer doubt their intentions. You have a strong enough reason to lean to the fact that they actually do pose a threat to your life. Why would it then be not acceptable to defend yourself?
I think if there's sufficient reason to believe that like an individual would pose a significant threat to your life, then not. I think that's justified to take their life. But
So don't
yeah, well,
backtrack.
listen, I do have to drop on the check 1 second because it's 3:30 and I've got to
That's
be
all
up
good,
for
man. But
half
I've
nine.
really,
But
really enjoyed this discussion. Thank you
uh
so much. And if you ever want to continue or have a further discussion, you're always welcome. Okay.
sure, absolutely. But I just want to clarify what I meant. I did mean just the sufficient reason of like another individual causing proportionate harm to you. I think you can respond proportionately, and I think when you start to try and quantify reasonability thresholds, I think it gets like problematic. Like you said with 5150, that seems to be an issue from my view, but like the way I
Okay, so
interpret it.
let
But
me just
if you
explain
don't think
something.
so, that's
Yeah,
fine.
let me just explain something really quickly, right? If somebody has a family in their house, which let's say could contain wives or children, vulnerable beings, the moment they believe this person is more of a threat than not a threat, which would obviously, if we had to quantify it, be anything above 50%, I think it's always morally justifiable to prioritize the safety and well being of vulnerable family members than trying to ascertain whether this person who you deem to be more of a threat than not a threat may or may not actually be a threat. I think in that scenario, defend your fucking family because this person's already broken into your house and you have logical reasons to believe they're more of a threat than not. So of course it's morally permissible to defend yourself. But I respect your perspective on that as well.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you having me up and hearing out the argument. I think we've been talking for like an hour now.
Yeah, really
So,
nice conversation though, man. And thank you again. When you do have more time, feel free to come back up. I'd love to delve more into this aspect of the argument. But we pretty much agreed on most things actually. Even this on the end, you agreed that you wouldn't think that was acceptable as well. But yeah, we didn't get to quantifying the exact thresholds, but that's all good, man. Thank you so much for the time as well.
thank you. God bless. Have a good
Have a
night.
good day,
Bye-bye.
man.